run better than he had in the past.
And he's a big lump of
And
lad.
he's a big lad. We don't, you know, the Spanish control the sport, so they're not going to handicap Danny right out. But at some point in the future, you know, in the next, it has to be a consideration. We can't keep making the bike heavy because the brakes unfortunately are actually doing it now. We have to use a special illegal set of brakes by the regulations on the 40 kilometre. Each time you apply for the brakes and those bikes.
Thanks, mate.
Three sets of last all year.
So the rotor actually does 3-4 meters?
Yeah, easy. They're comfortable, you know, practice everything else. But of course you crash and you can damage your knees very easily. They overheat and get up around 70 or higher, then they depend on the disc.
Hang on, Andy.
Yeah, possibly more.
3 or 4 places. So we've talked about tyres, we've talked about engines. Chassis design, no, the chassis thing, the CRTs, just the thing, the chassis things, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing, the CRT. I mean, it's sort of being phased out. It's no longer called a CRT, but it did show to all of us who were sceptics that you know, that the European companies can build really good chassis, and they're doing this in the Moto 2, so they're getting vast experience there with the same engine, the same Honda engines. That's the chassis and the rider that make the difference. Kalex in Spain is really good. The Burgess chassis is good on some circuits, not much. Yeah, there's other companies making them. So, and they look decent. They don't look like they've been made in the garage. I mean, Levi, we've seen some good chassis in England. They're good. You know, for sure, it's right.
Well, you're just back from England. What's your plan for next season?
I'm riding in England again, so I'm doing the Super Stock 600 again. I finished 9th this season, so I think if I can give that another crack, you know, I know all the tracks now, and I know I'm riding the same bike but for a different team. Staying on Kawasaki again for next season. So, but no, I mean, like Jeremy was saying before, and I thought it'd be good to bring it up, is talking about the different rider characteristics and the way you get along with people. And I had a guy named Alan who was my crew chief for the first half of the year, and he just didn't get along with my boss, and he got sacked up after I put it on pole and knocked hill. He got sacked after the next round, and I said, well, he must know what he was doing. We just put it on pole. But for whatever reason, I didn't get along, and so I had another guy working with me for the second half of the year. The same bike, but I think my results were not good in the second half, just because he wasn't bringing the confidence to me that, you know, Alan, who worked with me at the start of the year, he would really know how to fire me up, and he'd know what got the best out of me on the track, so he'd say things to me beforehand. He knew how I liked the bike setup, so we'd work together, and he'd talk to me about changing my riding style, or, you know, changing things at different tracks, whereas Bob, he would more or less just say, oh, you were 12th, that's not too bad, whereas that's not what a rider wants to hear, you know. Alan would be kicking my ass saying, that's not good enough,
job for you, JB. Spanner for Levi.
So,
it's inspiring confidence, isn't it?
oh, absolutely.
Everything's about being confident and
Yeah.
I mean, it's the rider's job to I always looked at it as a pyramid. The rider's on top, he's screaming at the bloke in because he wants to ride. The bloke underneath him's pushing him. That bloke's standing on somebody else's head, you know. So, you know, the rider's the guy who you know, it's his world championship, it's his championship, it's his desire, and everybody's there to help. And you know, everybody wants to win. And you're in a very, very competitive environment. I could take you 15 guys who are capable of winning the Moto 3 World Championship, of which half of thesis won. Jack Miller is another, clearly. And I could tell each one of those they could win the championship, and they believe it. But what they've got to understand is there's 15 other guys being told exactly the same.
Oh, exactly.
It's not, oh, I can do it, then I can go on holiday. Now you've got to show me you can do it.
In the Moto 3, a lot of the conversation would have been in Spanish. But Spain has done the right thing. They've started the kids coming in early, which we struggled to do in Australia. Like you started racing when you were 16, and you get started that.
No, I was 18 or 19, I think when I started. You start racing in my day because you needed a bike to go to work. That was the first time you saw a motorcycle, pretty much. It was the next generation that had dads buying them for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and what have you. So my beginning with motorcycles was more a necessity than any sort of desire to have a motorcycle. I couldn't afford a car. Prize was paying $8 a week, I think, for the premises. I wasn't a prize on that, but my mates were, so we were all in the same boat. So $2 a month for board, there wasn't much left.
Change out of a farming. Questions from you guys out there? Still got a bike on the ship?
No, I haven't. I had a CB 1100 RC, which I had for many, many years, which was cherry, and a film producer guy in Melbourne somehow found out I had it, rang me up, and I said, I want 16 grand for it. He said, oh, it'd be worth it. He sent a van over, it was gone.
And it's in good name.
Yeah.
Data Casmits.
Yeah, that's his name, Dita. Yeah.
Are you going to write a book?
There's been a lot of talk about it, and a number of years ago, several authors have spoken to me about it. It's a big thing to do, and clearly you only get one shot at telling your story, so it's got to be a very, very good book, and you've got to put the work in to do it. I think probably the answer would be probably yes, but I wouldn't expect to see it for 12 months. It's not going to be.
So you get a retirement?
Yeah, I'm still contracted with Yamaha for next year. I have to wait to see what they want me to do. Whether they want me to stay at home and prune the roses, or they want me to go off and do bits and pieces for them, or fill in, or do some other role.
Would you ever consider writing an engineering book, as in what all the suspension and all the tuning issues are, which is heaps of, but I know for cars and that they have the little pocket books. But for bikes, there's nothing. There's a whole heap of guys that run around banging into themselves, trying to take what advice you can get. There's very little definitive stuff from people who know, and that's you, I guess.
Yeah, there are some very, very good technical ones, but because we don't quite know why the motorcycle stands up, you know,
Is that the issue? Because I know for cars.
Casolta, an Italian guy, did a very, very good book with a few engineers that I worked with at the Bologna University. If you can get hold of a copy of that'll blow your brain away from the moment you start to read it, because it is very, very involved, and where they purely don't understand where certain things are happening, they're quite happy to say we don't understand. But I think the best thing is just to get on it and ride it and film it. Because you know, simply make it worse or make it better. You know, and sometimes, as Levi would say, if you don't know what to do and you do nothing, you get nothing. But if you do something and it makes it worse, well, you just clearly have to go the other way. But if you do nothing, you get nothing. You know,
It's 4 clicks, not one, isn't it?
I mean, everybody will say, what do I set my bike up to? You just say 1, the clicker in and back it out 7. It's in the middle. It's probably not too bad. That was the old days, but
We reckon it's not that easy.
it's not that easy.
I mean, that's what Dad and I did when I first got a 600. I knew nothing of suspension, so we used to just come out to Mac Park and I'd wind the compression just all the way hard just to see what it'd do, and then I'd go all the way soft. And then we just drive them.
Because you can't actually read like 1 click.
Well, I mean, we could do 1 click and stuff, but I thought I want to see what one extreme does and then the other extreme.
Wind it up 4 and
So
back
then
it
I
off
know
2, yeah.
Well, and then I know that if there is too much compression, I know what that sort of thing feels like and rebound and that sort of stuff.
Constantly, the suspension company, who had basically the field covered, which is Olam's at the moment, are continually working, not necessarily on a better product, but something different to sell. So they will say, oh, the new fork for 2014 is this, and you'll test it, and it won't be much different, but suddenly it's cost you another bloody. But it costs Hondas but taking it, Yamaha are forced to take it, Ducati's forced to take it, and
Because they were leasing suspension at one stage, weren't they? The old ones.
were they?
Yeah, and it was something like, I remember Anthony West had a wild card on a 125 and they leased, if I say it was old, it might not have been, but it was $12,000 to lease the suspension for the weekend. Oh,
Didn't you get a little man, right?
Westy?
You got a little man that did it for you.
Oh yeah, you had the technician come out, but Westy's old man, he's a plumber from Tully, he must do the hydroponics or something. But he actually had to hire Phillip Island for 2 days to go and test this suspension thing. So it's like 12 grand for the suspension for the weekend and then...
I ran for Phillip Island, plus.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a question for Jeremy. When you've been with, obviously with Rossi for a lot of years, communication with him, is can you speak Italian, or do you just, is it all done in English, or?
He's got his arms
I
folded.
can understand a bit of Italian, but no,
hands.
his pizza. His parents sent him to an English school in Pesaro when he was 14.
Oh, okay.
So his English is very good.
Yeah.
The language in the paddock is English because the Japanese, for example, they won't learn Italian or Spanish. They all learn English. And whether you've got Swedish technicians on the suspension and what have you, but the engineering language in Formula One and everywhere else, you communicate in English. So
Okay.
it hasn't been a drama at all. It's been a disappointment for me that in 34 years I never really learned another language. So that's probably something that I do have some regret. I tried a little bit of Japanese in the beginning, in the early days, and just didn't persevere.
Off the back, Dave.
Jerry Levi, just an interesting, going back to when you're talking about the development of Australian riders for the future, I'm only fairly new to the sport, and I've been cycling and still work with the national team here. It's interesting to lay the template over that the position motorcycling seems to be in here in regards to riders to Europe and being competitive on the world scene is where cycling was 25 years ago. I think the scary thing is though that cycling managed to much more quickly in the hierarchical suits in Australia were aware of that a lot more quickly and put some, and in combination with some very passionate people and coaches of the Australian team back in the 80s, and obviously with the help of the Australian Institute of Sport, were able to recognise how they had to do it with structure and support our riders and start at grassroots level with development riders and spend money taking them to Europe at that stage. And I think most people in this room would be aware, just because of the media these days, on how well we've done in cycling and how big it is now. And these stories that everyone's telling now about having to sell everything up to go to Europe, and now cyclists did that back in my era in the 80s and even into the 90s. And then very quickly it was turned around in regards to the Australian system, supporting junior riders, and we had a plan because we knew it would take years to do, to get into the scene, and the Europeans in their cycling were very protective of their system, as I guess the motorcycling fraternity is over there, as the Spanish would be, and the Italians would be very protective and wanted to stay on top. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of passionate people and a lot of money and a lot of support, and you can't do it without the government, you can't do it without your head body totally behind the grassroots level, and it does take years, but it doesn't seem to be, and this is where I don't know because I'm only new, it doesn't seem to be getting that sort of grip here, and we don't seem to have the people at the top that are driving that system. It seems like it's every man for himself.
Well, what I'd say to that is we've been lucky in the last couple of decades because we've had Wayne, Nick, and Casey. So our federation has been able to sit on its hands, perhaps. But if you look
what the Spaniards have done.
yeah, if they haven't had to do it going to now fall short, probably. But you could go back to the 50s and you look at the great Banjo. Banjo was part of a 3-driver government-funded team to Europe, and look where he ended up. You know, he was just the 3rd man in the team, but it was government funding that took Banjo and 2 other drivers over to those Grand Prix, and we don't have any big support here in Australia to get these guys to Europe in any team format or any format at all that really assists them.
There's lots of guys are buying bikes.
Look at him.
Yeah. It seems that the-
Didn't have a job.
The brilliant,
Levi's going to be so lucky because the skills that he does have in the machine shop are applicable to every motorcycle race team there is. So you know, if he was I don't know, he's a barman down the pub, he's not going to get much help. He's not going to get a ride because he can help. You know, that's a big step. You know.
He was
Spanish though.
Well, yeah. If we had, well, the situation in Spain is interesting in the long term. They had good small bike riders in Martinez and Nieto and those in the past, but nothing else. They now have a massive problem in Spain financially, but they also have 5 international standard racetracks, which you know are now carving up the pie into a too small a piece. So these racetracks are going to struggle to attract crowds because a month later you can go and watch the Spanish Grand Prix, you know, 200 kilometres away. So they're in trouble because of the way they've spent their money. But the federation is still there making sure that motorcycle racing happens. And the Brits did it years ago, and the Italians did it years ago. We've never really done it.
It's like we've got a couple of our young juniors here tonight. We've got to get 1,000 juniors in at the bottom to get the next world champion. You know, I call it the All Blacks thing. You know, everybody in New Zealand wants to pull that jumper off.
Yeah,
And we've got to do it here.
and I honestly don't have any answers. You know, to me, I'm not in the motorcycle in Australia, and I don't know anybody who is. But
Well, I don't think there's many fans of MMA in this room.
Perhaps that's the problem, that you don't know people, is it? And that says it all. What you should,
in
they
a sense,
should.
perhaps, yes, there is.
Well, I know when I did a wild card at the Grand Prix, the guy from MA who helped me out for the weekend and he showed me where to get the tickets, and he was super helpful, and he was really his name was Max, but he was really helped me out and stuff. But he said to me, all I've done is a sports marketing course. He said, I'm actually into football. And he said I work at MA because I finished university and I've got a job in doing sports marketing and stuff like that. But he had no interest in. He didn't care if I qualified for the Grand Prix or how I went. It was just that's his job sort of thing. And I think having people that are passionate about the racing, because that's what we're all in it for. We're passionate about riding, and so you want the people that are looking after the riders to be passionate about the same thing, not just passionate about working 9 to 5 and then going home and playing football.
Motorcycle in Australia and